Hi.
Yeah. Ready to go.
Before I start, guys, if you do hear an audio or PA coming over from our team, I will say the recording has started. Still recording including Blue Jeans. We also coming in remotely through a Skype session as well, so there might be some audio just on Blue Jeans as it interrupts the session throughout the day. But first of all, welcome this morning. Thanks for coming across. We're kicking off talking today about calling in the cloud through Telstra Calling for Office 365. Very excited to be here to talk about the product solution, talk about what our journey has been, and to try and provide some insights across that. First of all, just wanted to invite Gretchen up this morning just to try and provide a little bit of insight to Telstra and just welcome them.
Thanks. Yeah. Hi. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Gretchen Cook. So I've recently been appointed to head up Victoria and Tasmania, so all the account teams across majors and premier business. But just prior to this role, I was Director of Unified Comms, and as part of that role, I was involved in the development of TCI 365 from its inception to its launch into the market. So I'm very, very, very familiar with the product or the solution set, was George. So I headed up the whole go-to-market strategy and sales strategy with Microsoft. Now, this is a global first for Microsoft and Telstra. And just a small point, it's the very first time that Microsoft has actually let anyone else have a brand name in the same sentence as them in naming of a solution. So Telstra Calling for Office 365, that's a world first in and of itself. This is, as we've spoken about, a whole new way of bringing voice, video and collaborative solutions to our customers and to your employees and to your customers. And the way that we developed the solution was on a digital stack, and also for the first time ever, we actually had partners involved from the get-go. In the past, Telstra has not always been stellar in the way we develop our products and then get partners involved. But this time we decided that we would pick a very, very small select group of partners to start with us on the journey from the very start, to make sure that they really understood how to take this to market with our customers, how to make sure that the customer experience is really good, how to make sure that workloads get shifted to the cloud properly and things like that. So Jasco was one of the partners that we selected. They've had a very, very strong history with us in Telstra, and we're really pleased that, that they're part of the program. This is, it's an interesting thing because, and I'll be honest, it hasn't had quite the accelerated take-up that I thought it would, because we had the ISDN migrations that we're dealing with at the moment, the custom net migrations. And what we're finding is a number of our customers are really saying, you know, I want to just try this for a little bit and then roll it out after that. But what we are seeing that where customers are trying it, it's working very well. We're not having any problems with it. So I would really encourage you just to open your thinking about for your employees who are able to use this, particularly say in your corporate environments where it's fine for them to go to soft phone and so forth, that you really think about doing it as one big bang rather than, you know, step by step, because I think it's just going to be easier for you to do it that way, and Jasco, of course, have the expertise to do it. The other thing I would also mention is that we are providing integration into contact centre now with Genesys Pure Cloud. Genesys and Microsoft have got a very, very strong strategic relationship, and it's only going to be Genesys Pure Cloud and Pure Engage, I think, where we'll be able to provide this integration as well. So I'll leave it there.
Terrific. Thanks, Gretchen.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Gretchen.
Good. I'll hand it.
So, here today, largely going to be walking through what is TCO 365 offering, where does it start the market space, and as Gretchen quite rightly gave a appraisal on, you know, the market shifting, which is changing tides with regards to ISDN and actually in the end with those contract services in Australia. We're going to go through and demonstrate some demos. About making telephone calls and
that's the icebreaker.
so I can't possibly go to tell you what also, we're going to talk about some scenarios. So where does TCO 365 fit in the overall scheme? What's the good, the bad? Where does it excel? Where do you need to be mindful? Our experience in the marketplace, especially around the planning, and also the readiness and investment exercises that need to be conducted in order to make sure that you've got the best runway to take up and adopt the service without any false starts after you might turn the service on. As you'll see, it's very easy to straightforward to turn it on, but you want to make sure that you've got that appropriate service and delivery method to make it work. As always, the fun part comes around call plans and also the Office 365 licenses. Nothing is done for free, and certainly in this circumstance, we're still paying for a service. It's something that you are Telstra and Microsoft providing to, and you've got some options there about how you uptake and how you those. Some of the business rules and other portabilities, and also, I suppose, more importantly, from my aspect, what are the security implications? What do we need to look for from a TCO 365 perspective? What does it mean? And what are the recommendations that JASCO does today with regards to when we're addressing it for customers? Also, I suppose, importantly, around some of the limitations. And I suppose what I'm really excited about this morning is introducing towards the end of the presentation Paul and Diana from the Supreme Court of Victoria to come up to the front in between both Cameron and myself and to talk about what the Telstra Calling for Office 365 has meant for the Supreme Court. What have been the implications, challenges? What was the thought process around looking into such a technology? And what did the evaluation mean? And what is it actually brought towards for the Supreme Court of Victoria moving forward? So that's the short agenda for what we're kicking off. But a little bit about JASCO before we jump into it. There's a number of you within the room who I may or may not have actually had the pleasure of being introduced to. JASCO has been around since 1998. And so this year we just celebrated our 20th birthday, which was a great achievement. And certainly something was founded upon the way in which JASCO has always tried to strive and operate in those long-standing partnerships. It's something that Jason McClintock, our CEO, and also the founder of the organisation, apart from providing a great level of direction and accountability over that journey, has also made sure that us as an organisation make sure that we keep the customer first, got them in mind, and that we're asking the right questions about how we engage. We want to make sure that we're not just going in and selling a product, and hopefully today what you'll come out of this is that you're looking at this to say, what is it, not just a product? What do I know about it? What are the levers that I now need to understand in order to make the most if this is an appropriate investment? JASCO prides itself on trying to provide a balanced overview and understanding upon technology and making sure that it's applying to your specific business case where it's relevant. More recently, this is just, I suppose, buying a little bit of our cool, so I won't spend too long on this slide, but we were awarded the 2018 Telstra Microsoft Partner of the Year Award, which was awarded to us at Vantage. We've also got a long pedigree and long history of working in conjunction with both Telstra and Microsoft to deliver both UC infrastructure-based solutions. We were a finalist at the Microsoft Worldwide Awards Unified Communications Innovation Partner of the Year. We've also been UC Partner of the Year by Australia as well. So, Gretchen spoke a little bit about what the history or that this is a world first, and certainly the way in which the engagement has gone about from Telstra. This is very much, I suppose, a traditional Microsoft-style engagement where they bring partners in to test and adopt and understand technology. And for Telstra to do this, it was really quite innovative from our perspective. So the first, I went back to my diary and had a look at what was the first appointment I actually had in the calendar that was representative of Telstra Calling for Office 365 program. Back in the early days, it was known as Project Powder. First date that I had for out of the calendar was on the 1st of November. That was where we were brought in, I suppose, to try and provide feedback. Telstra were opening the arms to a number of partners, which we were then known as the Secret Seven. So it was a little bit sort of Dirty Harry-esque, I suppose, but there were 7 of us dotted around the country, and we all had the ability to dial in, shine in, and also provide feedback and also test and trial service before it came to market. General availability was released on the 11th of July, which was absolutely fantastic from a deadline perspective. It was, I think, just missed only marginally from what the advertised general availability date was, but to actually the amount of runway, the amount of build-up, and the amount of testing and exercise and feedback that was required in order to bring it to market, fantastic achievement to launch that. And actually, I reached out to George a couple of days ago just to say, are there any uptake or any stats that we had as a result of where we are at the moment? And I think the only stats we've got is it was at around the Vantage timeframe, which was around the 18th of September, where we announced there was around 2,500 people had taken up the services, and also that consisted of 100 orders that have been transacted. I suppose when we look at what does it mean from a market perspective, as Gretchen quite rightly indicated, we've got this cataclysmic event occurring at the moment where ISDN services or traditional copper services are being they are actively unable to try and purchase or extend those at the moment. And there is a point in time when NBN comes around, we're actually going to be being removed from premises. So that is an upcoming event that is happening industry right across Australia. And so there's a couple of options that are available for people. The option is to either switch across to SIP, you leave your voice services where they are, or maybe you might look at the option of changing what you do on your voice and maybe incorporating traditional voice stack with something more unified communications platform. And this is, I suppose, where Microsoft and Telstra have really come in to join and provide the best of both worlds outcome. We've got the traditional Microsoft UC stack on one side, brought together with the robust and obviously long-standing Telstra services around the carriage, which is obviously where the pedigree is being in the Australian market. So it's a really good, I suppose, amalgamation of two very complex technologies. When we put those two technologies together, a level of choice about how we choose to consume and I suppose engage with those. Quite rightly, it's that one telephone number that is available through Skype for Business Online and also Microsoft Teams. Telstra Calling for Office 365 lights up the ability for those two services to provide telephony, both base services. You can consume that regardless of whether you are, whether you're inside the corporate environment, whether you're at home, whether you're internationally, and you can present that same face communication regardless of where you are. There's no more of this picking up a desk phone, moving it around, and having to reprogram it for the location you're in. That concept of PABX and the handset being specifically tailored towards the location as opposed to the user. We now sign in as ourselves. We sign in as Courtney, Alan signs in as himself, and our identity follows us wherever we are. Telstra Calling now inserts the ability to, but not only for that identity follow, but it allows you the ability to dial out as that one number from all those different platforms. So how is it different? Why is Telstra Calling any different to what we've already been able to do for years within Skype for Business? Look on the right-hand side, Skype for Business, a typical deployment that, as engineers, has kept us, in business for a long time because there's a lot of complexity to it. You've got to engage with the networking team. You might have had to engage with the SQL team. You might have had to engage with the infrastructure team. You've had to engage with the telephony guys. You've had to engage with the firewall vendors and thereabouts. There are a lot of moving parts in order to deliver the same experience that we're now talking about as a licensable option. Right. Not only did you have to deploy it like that, but you then had to maintain it. And that was something that as I suppose, managed services providers and systems integrators such as Jasco, we provide those specialised services for businesses that wanted that on-premise based infrastructure. That hasn't gone away. And in fact, Microsoft have reinvested inside that on-premise stack. And Skype Business 2019 was just released a few weeks ago. So it is a technology that is still being enhanced and improved, not going away anytime soon. We've also got the other option around Skype Business with Cloud Connect Edition that was basically an all-in-one box you plugged in and then you connected up to your Office 365 based services. Once again, Microsoft are trying to hide a lot of the complexity inside the one chassis, but there are a lot of moving parts under the covers as to how to provide that. When we now come across to what is Telstra Calling for Office 365, we have the ability for those licenses, also those telephone numbers to be injected directly and don't need to have that on-premise footprint anymore. We don't need to bring hardware in. We don't need to wait for the delivery or the procurement of that equipment. It's a matter of making sure the telephone numbers have been brought into the tenancy and then assigning those off to the users, assuming the appropriate planning exercises have gone ahead to make sure that your user base and the network is capable of supporting the type of technology. And you're not having to choose between whether you want Skype, whether you want Teams. By virtue of turning on Telstra Calling for Office 365, you have the flexibility to dial out from both. But you need to nominate which one you're going to receive those inbound calls from. And that's something that can certainly help with the transition. You might see more about Microsoft promoting Skype Business and Teams alongside each other, but talking about how the future development and the future cloud-based development for them is certainly happening inside the Teams space. So Skype isn't disappearing inside that area immediately. It's still there today. But certainly you can look from a directionality point of view of Microsoft giving you the ability to use both clients on the understanding that their cloud evolution towards a more based framework in the long term. From a voice option, Telstra Calling for Office 365 is not the only show in town at the moment. There are a few options. You can see from the top of the stack we have Office 365. You can choose whether you're using Skype Business or Teams. Underneath that, in order to use any type of PSTN-based telephony services, you need that phone system SKU, which is a license option. You then have 3 different stacks. If you are looking to use Teams and you want those on-premise based carriage services, you can absolutely plumb in an ISDN or SIP-based services. You have a Teams direct routing appliance, and that gives you that local carriage service. What's great about this is that TCO or direct routing for Teams or cloud connectivity for Skype aren't mutually aren't mutually exclusive. You can run them within the one tenant alongside each other. So if we look at the scenario where we might have Australian services using the Telstra Calling for Office 365, but you might have an international subsidiary, maybe in New Zealand, maybe in Thailand, or maybe somewhere in the United Kingdom, that you can't deliver those United Kingdom numbers into Telstra Calling. You might look to leverage one of the other options that has an on-premise based footprint where you can drive those voice services in from that close location, close locale. Also, what's interesting here too is that you have some routing options in which way you can manipulate the call flow coming in and out of certain areas. So it is a great option that gives you a one-stop shop for the license to be absorbed inside the above cloud. If you still have requirements for those on-premise voice services, whether they're SIP or legacy-based ISDN, you still can keep those in and not be a second-class citizen there either. The architecture that has gone into providing, I suppose, the level of surety, when you look at it, Microsoft and Telstra are providing a service. Fundamentally, they need to make sure that that service is as robust and as rigid as it needs to be in order to provide the best possible outcome for people who are consuming the service. So by virtue of them taking away your ability to manage the underlying infrastructure, they need to make sure that it's being built appropriately. From the conversations that we've had with some of the back-end engineers, we don't have detailed diagrams thereabouts, but this is one that we had an engineer was able to provide us that with some obfuscation or some obscuring some of the key points. But suffice to say, there is the Telstra and Microsoft have met in 2 different locations geographically across Australia, and within inside those locations have multiple 10 devices used for communicating the SIP-based or the telephony-based information. So there's an enormous amount of carriage or capacity that is in between those 2 locations, providing multiple levels of redundancy from the Telstra core network back out across to the Microsoft 365 data centers. Let's jump in and kick off with a demonstration. Right, sure. Went to sleep, so it's not popping up on the machine. It should automatically. Well, this is quite ingenious. Let me just try and present that back out again.
I know.
Turn it off and turn it back.
Oh, pull that way. Yeah.
There you go.
You're right.
You're
just out. Yeah. As soon as I switch across.
Yeah, camera.
Yeah.
We're all going so horribly. There we go. All right. All right, we're in. And we're speeding. Fantastic. So what I've got for you on the screen is a window into our Office 365 tenants. So you can see my beautiful face there on the right-hand side. The litany of email addresses I have to try and accommodate people mistyping email address. Here's my name. Parents. But also down on the right-hand side, you can see the product license. when you've signed up and if you have the Telstra Calling for Office 365 license SKU added into your tenancy, it is as straightforward as turning that SKU on here to enable that particular license acquisition. Once that is on, the ability for you to leverage and make sure you've got those phone numbers or those phone services working, it comes down to coming in and assigning a telephone number to yourself. Once the telephone number has been assigned, you have the ability to make outbound and incoming calls at that point in time. And just to demonstrate that, I've got my mobile phone here. I've got put myself on my landline number. Things going well. And on the internet. It's actually the next question, isn't it? Here we go. My voicemail works.
Thank you. Please leave a message after the tone. When you've finished, please hang up or press pound key for more options.
Leave that one there. What you'll also notice is that my Skype status is set to presenting because I haven't video input in. So if I just set myself to available. Call that again. Charm. We got the call coming in at that point. So I can take that call.
You should have changed that photo.
That's my Modember photo. So the call came in. You saw that call. But what was interesting about that demonstration is it came into Skype. But I've got Teams running on my workstation as well. So within Teams, as I talked about before, I've actually only provided the ability. I've actually only nominated Skype to receive my inbound calls. But because I've got the license established, I've got it turned on. I've got Teams lit up for myself inside my tenancy. Choose how I actually want to dial to provide that outbound experience. So I get the ability to test Teams before I make the jump or before I actually completely transition. But I haven't lost any of that fidelity. So if I dial my mobile number. That's coming across. I'm off silent so you can hear it when it comes through. With the call going through there. So I've been able to make that all by the virtue of the Telstra Calling for Office 365 license. So it doesn't matter whether I'm using Teams, whether I'm using Skype, that license SKU allows me to provide that service regardless of what my chosen platform is. Inside the interface too, there's really, I suppose, two separate distinctions that I want to draw your attention to. These are the numbers. We've got 100 numbers that have been brought into our tenancy. We're not using all of those 100 numbers, but there is two key types of numbers: service numbers and user numbers. Service numbers are the numbers that are used by auto attendants or call groups, so that when I'm dialing into an IVR, it has a special pilot number that's associated with that service. User numbers, as you'd expect, numbers that can be assigned to users. So when we're going through the ordering process, planning the detailing, it's good to try and identify a call out early on. What are the types of numbers that we're going to be using? Certainly doesn't mean that you're restricted, you can't change that later on, that you can't get extra numbers later on, but certainly having that visibility early on certainly makes a difference with regards to setting up and establishing some of the call flows that you may be using through some of the call queues or groups. So as an example, we have an auto attendant up here that I have set up and established, and I've just called it the Jasco front of house. As you can see, it has a telephone number associated with it. And when I click on it on the right-hand side, you'll see how easy or how straightforward it was for me to actually configure this. Jump in, the edit box. When someone dials into this telephone number, I've set it to the time zone of Australia. It's enabled for our English language, so it speaks to us. I haven't put any voice recordings up. I'll just type text into this. That's actually going to use an Australian translated language to try and give that experience that it's it's relatively close. I've set some hours of operation, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, with insight when the calls come through. And what happens during those hours when the call is handled? First of all, we say, welcome to Jasco. And then we play a prompt. Press 1 for the operations team, press 2 for the sales team, press 3 for whatever I've needed to do. And then at the end of those, I've determined the actions and where I'd like to send those individual calls. So at the moment, I've sent them all to one particular group, which is called operations. We've also got the option for after-hours call handling, holiday periods as well, and also some dial scope, so we can choose who is actually where those calls are able to be routed to. So that's the auto attendant that provides the front of house, but the call queue itself is where people have a membership to. As you saw, that call was being passed across the queue. Courtney has the ability to be a part of that, and also Alan is part of this group as well. So as we come across here and have a look at the operations hunt group itself, and I'll edit those particular services once they open up. I've actually set this around a group membership, so I don't need to worry about the individual members. I've set this as a attendant calling, so regardless of who gets a call or regardless of what your status is, you should be presented with the call. And I've associated the group, and also the maximum calls in the queue is 5. And if there's a busy signal, disconnect, and people can wait for 5 minutes in this queue. Not that you would ever have to be waiting 5 minutes. Hopefully you're doing something important, but just for the purpose of the demonstration. So I'll cancel that, and I'll dial out of that so that we can actually listen to see what's occurring in those voice services. I'll just launch that up at the moment and dial that in through for the group.
Please select the following options. Press 1 for the operation team. Press 2 for the sales team. Press 3 for the admin. Press 0 to speak with an operator to assist during.
So just press 1.
Transferring your call to the operation.
Going through. So we've now gone into the queue, gone from the auto attendant across into the queue. Start to see that's being picked up. So that call will be offered to me, but also it's actually being offered to Alan as well.
My mobile.
And your mobile as well. Correct. What's really nice about this is that at Jasco we have hybrid environment. We have on-premise based services. You saw in that before with all that complexity and amount of services there. We have that at the moment. In actual fact, it's something that we're looking to try and completely remove ourselves across into entirely cloud. So we're trying to completely extricate ourselves of all of those on-premise working parts. But what's unique about that particular call example is the call came into Telstra Calling into an auto attendant. It went then across to the call queue. I was a member of that call queue. I am a cloud-based user. That call hit me, but it also then got routed down to our Skype business on-premise hybrid environment and was hitting Alan's as well. So regardless of where our users are inside the organisation, they're still treated as first-class citizens. There's a lot of flexibility and a lot of scope with the way in which we can deploy and which you can onboard and take up the service. It doesn't need to be an all-in immediately. You can pick and choose the elements, and you can move business units or people across in different areas into the service platform. I'll just jump back across to demonstration now. Also across to So you saw how easy it was for me to turn a license on, create call queues, create some workflows, have that working. And in actual fact, when I create that and set that up, it was up and running with the inside of me. So when that was from initial start time to at which time it was available to be called, was within inside of me from that perspective. Fundamental to know that when we're turning on these services, the best possible outcome is derived when we know what we're getting ourselves into. The speed at which you can adopt the service and turn on is probably only matched by the speed in which users will not take it up and which they will reject it if they have poor performance and poor outcomes. We always want to make sure that we're giving our users the best possible experience. We're giving them flexibility and choice of how they would like to work. But it's absolutely important and mandatory that you are approaching it with the right guys and you're understanding what the planning and assessment requirements are to make sure that you deliver the service as appropriately the first time around. So Microsoft understood that a number of years ago and they created what was called the Skype Operations Framework, or SOF, which is a very prescriptive, enormous process that details all of the types of management, engagement, meetings you need to have, discovery workshops, device selection, onboarding, enablement, enrichment, communications. It's an enormously prescriptive process that is really targeted in its fullest extent towards very, very large organisations. But what we need to do is, I suppose, really tailor that down and have that as a customizable or modular type of engagement that is specific to the customer needs. More recently, Microsoft have changed that to be from the soft to becoming the practical guidance for cloud voice. And in our delivery, and also from a Telstra requirement, anyone who onboards into the service needs to go through a mandatory planning, readiness and planning assessment exercise. Those services can be delivered by Telstra, or they can be delivered by qualified partners within the Telstra ecosystem. Obviously, Jasco is one of those. So our prescribed approach is really going through the planning assessments, making sure that we're understanding where are the users going to be based, how they're going to be accessing, what types of devices are you going to, what does your network look like? And as you look at the bottom right hand side, we've actually got a little Intel NUC there. We use those for our deployments. We put those out on site to make sure that we are testing types of traffic and workloads that we expect from the end users. So we simulate the traffic before any user actually starts to use it. And we identify, hey, is it working as we expect it to, and are we getting type of performance? We can then provide some real objective information back to the organisation saying, yes, thumbs up, it work, or no, we need to actually scratch the surface and dig a little deeper because there's something in the network that is changing or challenging aspects of the network. We want to make sure that when we hit it and when we turn it on, we are doing it in the best possible. Likewise, we go through some planning elements around how to migrate, where the voicemail is, what your dial plans are. Fundamentally, you want to make sure that when a user adopts it, their dialing patterns, I suppose, are similar to what they were previously. You know, obviously people can now dial by user, but if they also had the customer the ability to do extension dialing, you need to make sure that you're matching that and bringing that across. So understanding and documenting that. At the end, the outcome is literally a planning and readiness assessment document that provides you with a prescriptive approach, details all of the question and answers that we've gone through and sat down with you, gives you the benefit of planning and assessment exercises, and also gives you the migration plan, and also with the TCO design, and fundamentally too what the enablement or onboarding plan looks like, so that you can have a comfort in knowing that at which point you are ready to proceed, you have a plan appropriate to deploy that to the best possible success to those. So, how has Telstra delivered this service back out to market? There are three fundamental calling plans in operation today. So we have the standard, the essentials, and the premium. The standard is, as the standard does, you turn it on and then you pay for all your usage. It's an $8 per month ex GST, and you just pay for those calls on the standard Telstra bill rates. They'll presumably advertised somewhere. I actually don't know where those call rates are advertised.
Working through account executive. So it's a little bit more complex than that. So if you have an existing or for biz arrangement or something like that, the standard calling line will inherit whatever your negotiated rate with Telstra. So that's one of the big benefits.
So also for the big businesses too, they've got to negotiate.
Correct. So you don't have to renegotiate contracts or anything like that. If you're migrating for another telephony platform, you inherit those rates.
The Essentials call and the Premium call. So Essentials is really the unlimited local and national on business calling within Australia, and the Premium adds on the ability to have that mobile inclusion in there as well. You can see from the right-hand side, you're showing the demonstration, doing that license or allocating that per user. It's straightforward, so it can also be conducted. But what is important to note too is that you need to make a decision on which plan you're going to choose. I can't have 5 users one plan, 100 users with another, and 5 users with another plan. So you need to nominate up front, and we need to always perform that modelling to identify what is the most cost-effective way, or what is the most appropriate call plan for each customer to adopt that particular service. For the Microsoft licensing options, there's a number of, I suppose, ways in which you need to procure the base license in order to add on TCO 365 license. Not really pulling any punches. Know that Microsoft's top end SKU, the Enterprise E5, includes the phone system. Then just add on the Telstra SKU on the phone. You've also got the E3 SKU that you can then add on the phone system license along with Telstra Calling, or Office 365 Enterprise 1 on the phone system. Or finally, Government Business Online Plan 2 is its own with phone system, also Telstra Calling Office 365. So you can build that. You can license your users individually. You'll need to make sure that it's the same Telstra call plan. Obviously, if you have an enterprise agreement, those prices are subject to whatever you've negotiated with your LSP or Microsoft. And then finally, the conferencing add-on is included typically with the E5. However, if you would like the ability to provide that outgoing PST and telephone number for audio conferencing, that's add-on. Good users. So from a business rules perspective, what do we need to know, and what are the gotchas? First of all, your Office 365 tenant needs to be in Australia. You can't have a tenant that's in Europe, can't have a tenant in America, can't have a tenant in Singapore. It needs to be an Australian-based tenant. And that's one of the fundamental business rules. So even before you're considering this or even go down the path of trying to say, is it right for me? If your tenant is outside of Australia, the answer to that is no. You are not eligible to turn the service on. Similarly to telephone numbers that can be brought in, to the best of my knowledge, they're only Australian-based telephone. I haven't seen or heard of any exception to that particular rule. You've actually got some customers at the moment who have regional sites, around say regional sites, fairly big region called New Zealand. They're trying to do some of those numbers in. We need to come up with other options or other alternatives for those guys because we can't bring those parachutes. Right? Likewise, at the moment, it's available to Telstra Enterprise and Premium Business customers. Small to medium business may not apply, but generally speaking, if you have a Telstra account executive or you are represented by Telstra, then you are more than likely able to uptake. There is a conversation happening at the moment, and I'll have a chat to you afterwards because I was just looking for updates to see what is if there's a change landscape from the small to medium journey. Certainly something I know Telstra has identified, and I believe it's something they're working towards opening up that ability for transact. But I don't have any concrete information on what the availability of what the likelihood is that short term. Likewise, the Telstra needs to be added as your CSP to deliver the Telstra Calling for the 365 license. And that doesn't necessarily mean that if you have an EA, you are giving it all across to Telstra. CSP is just the ability for Telstra to inject those licenses into your tenant. Likewise, if you have your CSP with another provider at the moment, that CSP does need to come across to Telstra for an absolute minimum of the base licenses. So all of those E3, E5, E1s that I saw before in the phone system, they will absolutely need to come across to Telstra as part of turning on the service and being able for it. And as you can imagine, obviously, as this is a net-based service, absolutely mandatory requirement, unless of course you have an Azure Express route, private routing through the network out to Microsoft data centers. So the experience learned from Jasco with the deployments that we've done today, but also with our own onboarding, has really been it's fundamentally a three-step process. Once the planning exercise has really gone through, it's about processing the order, making sure we've got all the background detail, putting that through, and then you get the customer gets a DocuSign, a document which they need to approve and sign off. That then really kicks off and starts the order process. Once that process has been started, the customer goes through and allocates Telstra's DSP and also provides delegate admin permissions across into the tenant. And from that perspective, once that's occurred, Telstra is then able to inject the licenses into the tenant. And once the license has been injected, we can also then go through the number porting or number allocation process that allows the customers to start consuming those base services. From a porting perspective, this is actually an area that we've seen a great deal of improvement. I had reached out to our project managers to find out what's been their opinion with regards to the numbers that they've migrated across. Greenfield is obviously the quickest. There's been an interface created from Telstra that allows you to generate and pick up new numbers very, very quickly. In actual fact, our tenant from when as you saw earlier on, we were part of the pre-release. When we went GA, our tenancy got stripped. We all had to move back online. So Jasco has now then procured the service again in its full function. And our go to work from when we submitted the order to where we updated was 2.5 weeks before we were live, waiting for the order processing, the transactional nature of the order. In bringing numbers across from Telstra, or if you have a Telstra ISDN or SIP service at the moment, porting those numbers in, we've done that a number of times at the moment, and the success rate is actually a 100% success rate. But also you get the ability to actually have those numbers provisioned inside TCO first. You can test the outbound dials so that you make sure that it's working. Am I happy with it? Am I getting a great experience? Is the network doing what I expect it to? And then you nominate the cutover date. When the cutover date happens, all those inbound numbers come into TCO 365, and you get a week's grace. You get what's called the soak test, where at that point in time you can pull the pin and go, hey, I'm not happy with this. I can pull it out and I can switch back. Those numbers will then go back across to wherever they were previously terminated. Or complex number porting or porting in from other carriers. We haven't done one of those yet, so I can't really provide them. But typically, from our experience before TCO, when we're doing complex porting, it's generally around a 6-week runtime to engage the other carrier, nominate the date in which to do the port cutover, at which point we believe it's a knife-edge cutover to bring those services to Telstra. And you then have a nominated window, which is really about the ISDN or carriage-to-carriage services to cut back if you need. But generally speaking, I think that's only about 24 hours normally. You've got to cut that back over to the losing carrier. Less. The slowdowns that we've been feeling from our customers have largely been around when the DocuSign document comes back, there's some actions that need to be completed by the customer, which is around the CSP allocation and the delegate admin. That has caused some slowdowns for us, with a lot of customers asking the question, why do Telstra need to be delegate admin? Why do you need to be CSP? So that is definitely a concern for a lot of businesses and customers in the market space today, and something that Telstra have addressed or are addressing and absolutely open to having a conversation about. The CSP allocation is absolutely mandatory. There's no free tickets on that. But I do believe that Microsoft and Telstra are currently working in those to try and better understand what is the permission model that Telstra have. Largely, it's Microsoft's permission model. They have the permissions. It's their service. Telstra need to be able to inject themselves in to get relevant data out of that service. At the moment, delegate administration is the only way that I'm aware of in which they can receive that information. But certainly, it's been a bone of contention that that's worked for a lot of onboarding customers. What we've been seeing in the space around keeping the environment secure. Whenever you invest in a cloud-based technology, it is accessible anywhere in the internet. Whenever we had that on-premise-based infrastructure, it was generally accessible by our corporate network. If we chose to expose that to the internet, we chose to expose it, we then had to protect it or provide some wrappers around it. Office 365 obviously is a worldwide based cloud service. It has the ability to be accessed from anywhere across the internet. And as such, it's absolutely fundamental to make sure that you're keeping yourselves as updated and as relevant as possible. From an end user client perspective, Teams or Skype, Teams is managed, is actually a managed client from Microsoft through their Office 365 channels. So you will always get the best of breed. You'll get the updates as soon as they're available to your tenant and the client that you're running. Skype for Business, on the other hand, should be updated as frequently as possible based around the cadence that Microsoft are upgrading their backend services. So the recommendation for us is to make sure that your connectivity or the client you're using to consume the technology is getting updated regularly. Don't try and come into TCO 365 with an OCS 2007 client. In fact, it won't work. You're going to have a really poor experience. Don't come into it from a Link 2010 or a Link 2013. Make sure that you invest in upgrading those client experiences to get the best possible outcome. If you're not currently familiar with it, the Microsoft Security Score is a free product that gives you the ability to baseline your tenancy for the activities and services that you have turned on against everyone else in the world. Jump in there and have a look. It allows you and then provides you with some fundamental guidance of what you can do to improve your security posture. Microsoft aren't saying it will protect you against everything, but what they're saying is that you can better protect your investment by turning on and tweaking and engaging certain services to turn on. So it's absolutely a key requirement or key recommendation of ours for anyone who has an Office 365 tenant, regardless of the services that they're putting in, to make sure that you familiarise yourself with that Microsoft to try and provide the best outcome for your users. And not finally, but the last on this particular page is modern authentication. We're probably all familiar with the old security prompt that Microsoft used to pop up with the username and password. You type in username and password, you go through. That was what we call legacy authentication. Didn't often integrate or extend well into more broader authentication toolsets such as SAML, maybe third-party certificate services or third-party identity services. Enabling modern authentication allows you to take advantage of some of the new multi-factor authentication tools that are available inside Office 365 and also a number of other identity providers. So certainly turning that on, disabling legacy-based authentication is a big improvement. One of the fundamentals for why that is such a big improvement is it allows us to turn on conditional access. And this is something that Jasco has done for a number of months now that we've actually had access and the service has now started to become supported with a number of different tool sets within inside the Office 365 stack. But fundamentally, conditional access says under certain circumstances, when this happens, do this. So I'll provide you with an analogy. When I record this now and I take my laptop into work, I'm logging onto a domain joint machine, something that I manage all of the organisation. I'm also coming from a protected network, our corporate network. So I'm inherently trusted for that location. So when I access Skype for Business or Teams or any other Office 365 services, it allows me to use my username and password. But if I take my laptop home, I'm now coming in from a network that traditionally Jasco doesn't trust because I'm outside the corporate network. So my username and password might not be just enough. It's enough to say that's correct, but hey, we want to further authenticate you because you're coming from an area we don't know. And so in that case, we've got a conditional access policy that says if Courtney's coming from outside the network, even if he's got his username and password correct, I'm going to call him. And when I send that call through, Courtney needs to say yes, he accepts that, not that authentication first. So I receive telephone calls whenever I access my corporate services outside the network that are published through Office 365. It doesn't need to be just based around the location of the IP. It could be the device state. It could be a sign-in risk. It could be that Courtney always signs in Melbourne, but I've just seen him travel across to somewhere else in the world. So if you've got that impossible travel scenario, if you're logged in multiple places, Microsoft will increase the risk on that, and they'll then be prompted for maybe further authentication. Or rather than prompting, you might say, too risky, block the access. It just doesn't happen. So there's a lot of options around the conditional access SKU. It is something that's available as part of the Azure Active Directory P1 and P2 SKU. It's not part of your standard Office 365 services, but if you are an E5 customer, you will have access to those technologies. So absolutely recommend investigating it and reviewing it. I mentioned before a bone of contention around delegate admin access, and I don't want to steal any of Paul Lynn's thunder further on, but I know it's an area that the Supreme Court has been juggling with as well. What we've been recommending for customers to do is, we've been told to turn delegate admin on. We have done that in our tenancy, but there's no point turning it on and not actually saying, all right, what's happening? What does the delegate admin privilege mean, and what does it mean? So within our Jasco environment, I've configured an alert. If anything happens in our tenancy from Telstra CSP based login, it's going to send me an alert. It's going to send an email across to our security operations group saying, this has occurred, this has happened. Whilst, understandably, the action has already been completed, we don't expect Telstra to be doing anything malicious. We also want to make sure that we're at least keeping the laws. So that if anything does happen, we've got a recordable information trail to say, hey, what was happening here? You were logging into the environment. As you can see here, we've got a couple of robots. The TAM, Telstra's Marketplace Robot 2, has been logging in or trying to log in. It hasn't succeeded on a couple of those. They're coming from different IP addresses. As you can see here, this is by virtue of us assigning that CSP access. They're not doing anything in the tenancy, but they're attempting to log on, make sure they can get access. Now, I believe today actually that might be for billing purposes. So, but best case scenario, turn the alerting monitoring on. So, what to be aware of. Voice feature parity between Skype Online and Teams is certainly there, but between what was available from full on-premise deployment with Skype for Business is not there. We're obviously going to see a lot of investment inside that Teams space. Skype for Business on-premise is still a product being supported, developed, and released by Microsoft. But if you're expecting some of the complex manipulation and complex scenarios that are available in Skype for Business on-premise in the cloud today, some of that feature parity is not there. It is very, very close to these certain substances that if you discuss or at least talk about. The contact center space is still evolving. As you would have heard from Gretchen earlier, they're talking about an engagement with Genesis Pure Cloud and also IPscape, which basically takes or consumes the call in a platform that allows contact center agents to log in and interact between Skype. We're also seeing the guys from In-House Interactive provide some interesting innovation in that space too. So there's a lot of movement. There's a couple of players in there, but certainly something to be aware of. And that space is building and fledgling. It's not nearly as well established as some of the previous on-premise based services. Advanced manipulation of the SIP packets. If you are a SIP junkie, we've got a couple of guys in the room here from Jasco who live and breathe this sort of stuff. Service has been provided by Microsoft and Telstra. The skill sets, sadly, I'm talking to you guys now, but the skill sets that you have in that region is being managed by Telstra, who will provide those types of carriers and solutions. So the troubleshooting will go through the Telstra-based support testing service. If there's anything that needs to be of an advanced nature, provide some stripping headers or replacing certain fields, that's something that isn't done at a technology level now. It's something engaged and thought through the other Telstra service test. First of all, see if it's possible, and second of all, see if it can be done. As I mentioned earlier, you can outbound call from any platform, but that inbound call needs to be determined by your interrupt policy, whether you're coming in from Skype or coming in from Teams. But can pick and choose one that is. It can be per individual or it can be per groups of users. And you enable that. The client route to the internet or the Office 365 has never been quite important. Voice is one of those technologies that if it's not quick, it's not sharp, it's not fast, everyone's going to hate it. Because we're very used to the fact that we talk to people, we can have a conversation. We can there's no long discrete little pause and we're not getting lots of echoing thereabouts. You want to make sure that is just as quick, as clean, and as crisp as possible. And also there is a concurrent call limit per user account. So for those of you in the room who might have thought, I might just buy one license and I'll have 27 people log on with that one license, and I'll have all of those people dial out. There is a fair use in play that prevents you from having one license with 27 people log into it consuming that license. So there are no free lunches on that one. You need to make sure that you can actually create an outbound call. I think it's 2 or 3, but there's a fundamental amount before it actually cuts you off and says, no, I'm not making a third call as that same person at that particular point in time. And also one that we found out, actually I think Jason was the prime recipient of this particular issue, make sure that your Office 365 location is set to any other location. Calling icon doesn't show up, so you can't make a call. In conjunction with Telstra, as I said earlier, the route to the internet has never been more important. As one of the areas that we've invested a significant amount of time in Jasper trying to provide what is the best possible solution to route out to the internet if a customer is having a challenging time in achieving that sort of outcome. So our network engineers have spent a lot of time in devising a solution that allows you to specifically route the calling traffic and Skype and Teams out through an appropriate path. And if traffic optimization or improving your path out is something that is required or something of interest to you, absolutely come and have a chat to us, because it's something that we've actually tried to create a standardized approach in how we attack this relation. Obviously, Telstra in a great space to be able to provide those Telstra Internet Direct services, to bring those in to provide the best class and the closest connection to service of those Office 365 data centers. I suppose I'd like to introduce Paul Etiano from Supreme Court to Victoria to come up and just really, I suppose, have a bit of a chat about some customer insights about what it's meant for Paul and Supreme Court and why they looked at TCO as a platform and a product. What sort of thinking and decision making